Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Becomes a Pokemon Trainer. In this story, it is simply what you might expect. The story of My Hero Academia, but in world filled with not only quirks, but also Pokemon. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel, after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Izuku Midoriya was on his hands and knees, crying his heart in pain out as his wish becomes true. Before him, in his deflated and weakened state, was the number one hero and symbol of peace, All Might, and he said the words that Izuku always wished to hear. Young man, you too can become a hero. Izuku could barely believe the words, thinking in disbelief that this was unreal, a dream. The comforting touch of Eevee and Pikachu were all the proof he needed to dispel thoughts and fully believe. Izuku cried and shook even more. Then All Might said to him, I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. The tears and shaking stopped and Izuku looked up to his idol, trying to comprehend the words spoken to him. Huh. Was all Izuku was able to say, his face one of pure confusion and disbelief. All Might looked upon the boy and raised his head in a thunderous laugh. He said, haha, oh, you should see your face right now. Don't worry. I'm not going to force this on you or anything. That wouldn't be quite heroic of me, would it? All Might stepped closer to him and raised a finger to the sky. Listen well, young man. This is your choice. All Might yelled out. He then shot his finger out to him and shouted again, blood comically shooting out of his mouth. Do you want to accept my awesome power or not? Izuku couldn't comprehend what was going on, his brain practically short-circuiting at the words said to him. What is this? Izuku thought bewildered. What's going on? Izuku at first though it was all a joke when All Might laughed at him, but the words that followed and his question just made him more confused. Izuku looked to Eevee and Pikachu, who too were stumped. Izuku said, what do you mean? What are you saying, All Might? What do you mean by inherit your quirk? All Might coughed and wiped the blood from his mouth. He said, let me explain. There are a few things you should know about me and my quirk. Everybody thinks that my quirk is super strength or some kind of invulnerability or even both. When reporters or talk shows ask me, I always make a joke, dodge and forget the question. And that's because the world needs to believe that their symbol of peace is a natural born hero, like any other. But I'm not. Izuku stared at All Might in shock and wonder. All Might raised his hands above him and proclaimed, I wasn't born with this power. It's a sacred torch that has been passed on to me. And you are next, kid. I can give you my powers. Izuku laid there silent before shrieking out in shock. No way. That's not possible. This is going a little too fast to comprehend. The idea of passing along a quirk in of itself sounds crazy. I have never heard anything like it. Every thought about passing over me and aspires unheard of. All Might and the two Pokemon stared at Izuku, lost in his own mind, mumbling incoherently about how impossible it was or how world-changing it is. Pikachu facepalmed while Eevee stood there and sighed, a comic sweat drop on his head. All Might stood there and sighed at the boy's never-ending stream of work vomit. He said, sounds like you are overthinking this whole inheriting thing. Wishing to put a stop to it and bring the boy back to reality, All Might shouted out, stop nerding things out. Izuku snapped out of his mumble phase and knelt straight, not wishing to get yelled at by his idol anymore. All Might sighed and said, look, you are just going to have to adjust to this new reality. Plain and simple. I can transfer my powers to you. And that is just one facet of my secret abilities. All Might held out his hand as it glowed in a rainbow light. The true name of my power is One for All. One, for, all. Izuku repeated out. Yes. All Might said. One person improves the power and then hands it off to another person, and it continues to grow as it's passed along. It is the cultivated power and life energy of those before me that allows me to save those in need of a hero. That is the truth behind my power. Izuku stared at All Might in disbelief. This world-shaking truth. This power. Why would he tell me? Why would he choose to give it to me? Izuku thought. He voiced his thoughts, and All Might replied, I was on a long hunt for a worthy successor, to pass one for all to another, and have them take my place. He looked to Izuku with full conviction and said, and then I met you, and saw how you jumped into action, while the rest of us stood by and did nothing. You may be a quirkless fanboy, but you chose to save that kid, in spite of dangers, in spite of holding no power of your own, in spite of the fear in your eyes, and your Pokemon followed you with no hesitation and followed in your bravery. You acted like a true hero. Izuku gaped in shock, the words echoing in his mind like a mantra. His eyes glazed as the tears came back with force. Izuku grabbed and hugged Pikachu and Eevee, holding them tight as they looked upon him with the same conviction and passion that All Might had, their eyes telling him that all that his idol said was true, and that they believed in him. As Izuku broke down, All Might chuckled and said, geez, you gotta stop crying if you want my quirk. Come on kid, I need an answer. Izuku thought All Might said so much to encourage me, told me what I wanted to hear. He even told me the truth of his quirk. He believes in me. Pikachu and Eevee believes in me. It's time I start to believe in myself too. And it starts here. Izuku let the two Pokemon go and stood up, looking upon All Might with eyes full of passion and strength. Okay. Izuku shouted. I'll do it. I accept. All Might looked upon his new successor with pride, smiling brightly. No reluctance. No hesitation. That's exactly what I like to hear. He reached out his hand towards me and said, "Welcome aboard, kid, let's get started." Izuku took his hand, shook it and said, "Yes sir. I am Izuku Midoriya, and I will strive to be your truest successor." All Might smiled brighter and said, "Very well, young Midoriya. My real name is Toshinori Yagi, but you can still call me All Might if you still want." Izuku nodded and said, "Okay All Might." They let go and Izuku stepped back and knelt towards Pikachu and Eevee. He looked to All Might and said, "I would formally like to introduce you to my childhood partner Pokemon, Eevee, and my best Pokemon friend, Pikachu." The two called out their names and greetings officially to the symbol of peace. All Might nodded and said, "It's good to meet you too, as well." All Might then perked up and a look of realization popped up in his face. He then looked to Midoriya and said, "Oh by the way, before we get started, I think it's best if we inform your parents of this, or rather inform them of a reason for me to train you, so that it wouldn't suspicious of an old man like myself to spend so much time with a kid." Izuku's face lit up in realization too and said, "Oh you're right. We need to ask my mom about this." Izuku's look of realization then turned to fearful horror. "Oh, crap." Izuku cursed. "Mom. She doesn't know about what happened with me and the sludge villain. She must be worried sick about me." All Might gained a similar look of realization and said, "Oh right. We wouldn't want your parents to get worried about you. Alright, let me get changed up a bit, and I'll drive you to your home. There we can discuss this with your parents." Izuku nodded, biting back a retort about his mom being his only parent, as far as he was concerned. The four then walked down the alley, as the sun started to sink behind the buildings, and night began to settle. A few hours later, after All Might changed into a more respectable looking attire, white dress shirt with a red tie and black dress pants, and following directions, the four stood outside the Midoriya household. Izuku started mumbling again about what to say to his mom before being shocked by Pikachu. All Might gave Pikachu a thumbs up, to which the electric mouse Pokemon rubbed his head in embarrassment. All Might said, "Just breathe young Midoriya. Remember what we discussed on the way. We aren't going to tell your mother about my real identity or the truth behind my quirk. We are just going to inform her about the incident with the sludge villain, and tell her that I wish to train you to get into UA, alright?" "Yeah." Izuku confirmed. "It's just that my mom, she worries a lot. It has just been the two of us, and Eevee, for as long as I can remember, so she worries a lot for my safety, especially when I was told I was quirkless." All Might looked to his successor, happy that he chose a successor with a kind and thoughtful heart, but also sad at hearing about him and his mother's hardships. "What about your father? Surely, if your mother is as kind as you told me, then he should be around more often." Izuku looked down and shook his head. "No. I don't ever remember a time with my dad. The only thing about him that my mom could tell me about him was that I had his eyes and that he works overseas in America. Other than that, nothing." All Might frowned sadly. He also noticed Eevee brushing his on his legs, a look in his eyes that All Might interpreted as no more, probably trying to spare his partner's feelings. All Might nodded and said, "I see. Well, enough gloomy stories. I believe we got a mother to inform." Izuku nodded and rang the doorbell. Almost in an instant, so fast even All Might barely registered it, the door opened to reveal Mrs. Inko Midoriya, shorter and more whiter than her past years, who rushed and hugged Izuku in a tight painful embrace that could give a Buya a run for its money. "Oh my baby." Inko Midoriya cried out, a waterfall of tears shooting out of her eyes. "I saw what happened on the news. Katsuki being captured by the sludge villain, you trying to save him, and All Might saving the day. Oh, I tried calling, but you wouldn't pick up and I was afraid you were hurt. Please don't scare me like that again." "Ha." All Might thought. He wasn't lying when he said he takes after his mother. Waterworks and everything. Izuku hugged his mom back and comforted her. "It's okay mom. I'm fine. Both me and Kat Katsuki are alright. All Might was there and he saved us. So there's no need to worry, okay?" Mrs. Midoriya broke the embrace and nodded, wiping her eyes. She then noticed the man beside Izuku and said, "Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't notice you there. Izuku, honey, who is this man?" Izuku shook his head and said, "Oh yeah, we might want to take this inside, it might take a while." Izuku mentally cursed at himself for his inability to lie to his mom. All Might walked up and held out his hand and said, "Hello ma'am, my name is Toshinori Yagi. I am a representative of All Might. I was tasked by All Might to drive your son, young Midoriya, back home after the incident with the villain, and to talk to you about something important." Inko stuttered and quickly shook his hand, introduced herself, and thanked and invited him inside. As they entered the household, Inko called out Mimi. Coming out of a room was a Mr. Mime, wearing an apron similar to Mrs. Midoriya's. "Mr. Mime," they called out. Inko said, "Quick, help me make some tea and treats for Izuku and our guest, and some of Eevee and Pikachu's favorite poke food." The two mentioned Pokemon cried out in delight and quickly made their way by the living room. All Might said, "Oh please, don't trouble yourself on my behalf Mrs. Midoriya. I'm quite alright. Inko replied, oh, but I insist. It's the least I can do for both you and All Might, for saving and taking good care of my son. I wouldn't take no for an answer. She looked at him with eyes that flared with such resolve. The symbol of peace was taken aback by such fiery determination and nodded. Okay, he said. Inko immediately took a 180 change and smiled happily, telling him to sit by the living room before rushing over to help Mr. Mime. All Might thought, wow. Her determination, plus her caring, motherly nature, reminds me of Nana. And those powerful eyes, they were so fierce and beautiful. Toshinori shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts, not wanting to come on to young Midoriya's mother. Still, he couldn't help but ogle her caboose as he walked to the living room. Izuku noticed that interaction and stood there perplexed as to what happened, before shaking his head and heading towards the living room. After a short while, Mrs. Midoriya sat with her son on the couch while Toshinori sat in a chair, all holding a cup of warm tea. Pikachu and Eevee laid close by, nibbling hungrily at their poke food, while Mr. Mime stood by the kitchen sweeping. After settling in, Mrs. Midoriya asked, so, Mr. Yagi, could you please tell me what is it that you must talk to me about? Toshinori nodded and said yes. Ma'am, as you know from the news, young Midoriya and his Pokemon here were involved in a recent incident with a sludge villain, to which the villain was stopped and apprehended by the pros and All Might. Inko nodded and said yes, I was quite worried sick when it happened. From what I heard, Izuku, Eevee and Pikachu were almost killed by the villain. Please, I thank you for taking my son home safe and sound, and I wish to extend my heartfelt gratitude towards All Might for saving my son. Izuku has always admired All Might more than anything in his life, and I'm glad that our symbol of peace was the one that saved him. Izuku blushed in embarrassment, knowing full well said hero was right in front of them. All Might smiled sheepishly, and said, you're welcome, Mrs. Midoriya, and I will make sure All Might likewise is told and apologize that he himself isn't here. Unfortunately, as the #1 hero, there comes a lot of paperwork. Though I can already tell what he will probably say. He would say that it was no problem, young madam. I am overjoyed for your thanks and glad I was able to have such a doting mother be safely reunited with her son. Inko giggled blushing and said, yeah, that sounds like him, and please, I'm not that young, Mr. Yagi. Yagi smiled sheepishly. Could have fooled me. When the door opened, I didn't know if I was meeting his mother or his sister. Inko blushed and giggled more, all the while Izuku stood there in shock at the obvious flirting that even a social dunce such as In could tell. Izuku fake coughed, which got All Might's attention. All Might coughed embarrassed and continued, anyways, about the incident. The villain also took a hostage, a young boy by the name of Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku here saw that his friend was in mortal peril, and tried to rescue him on his own, before All Might intervened. But before you claim that I mean Izuku to be at fault, I'm not. Far from it. In fact, me and All Might wish to praise young Midoriya for his brave actions. Before All Might came onto the scene, the heroes there were outmatched and struggling against the villain. It was likely that young Bakugo would have had fatal injury. But then your son stepped up and tried to save the boy with no hesitation, and even succeeded in freeing him from the villain, and made it easier for All Might to defeat said villain. In fact, your son's courageous spirit inspired All Might to save the two of them, no matter the cost. Inko gasped and looked at her son, her eyes brimming with proud tears in her eyes. She hugged her son and said, oh Izuku, I'm so proud of you. You saved Bakugo and earned All Might's praise. But please don't do anything so reckless again. Izuku smiled and replied, thanks mom, but it wasn't just me. Eevee and Pikachu helped me blind and hurt the villain enough so I could free Bakugo. They helped save me too. But, I'm sorry mom, but I can't do that. When I saw his eyes that were scared and needed help, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing like everyone else. I just couldn't. So if someone in front of me is danger again, Izuku lifted his eyes to look at his mother with pure determination. I won't stand by and do nothing. I will save them, just like a hero would. Because that's the hero I want to be. A hero that saves people that can't help themselves, with a smile. Inko looked at her son in shock. The words he asked when he was little flashing in her mind. Do you think I can be a hero, too? Inko teared up more and looked down, shadows covering her eyes. I hurt you, didn't I? Inko asked. Both Izuku and Toshinori were taken back with what she asked. She continued with, when you asked me if I thought that you could be hero, even without a quirk, I hurt you deeply when I said I was sorry. When I said no. I hurt you deeply. You were my son, my pride and joy, and when you needed me to help you, I tried to destroy your dreams. I didn't believe in you like a mother should have, like I should have. She sniffed and wiped her eyes. But you didn't quit. Even after that, you still didn't give up. You kept running toward your goal with no hesitation. You had to walk this path alone, with no one but Eevee and Pikachu by your side, with nothing but their support and your own, and I wasn't there to help you. I'm a failure of a mother. But Izuku, you saved someone, you inspired All Might himself, and did it with no quirk of your own. I'm so sorry Izuku, I should have supported you. I should have told you the words that you should have heard. No, the words that I knew I believed in. Inko looked up to her son with a river of tears in her eyes. Izuku, I do believe that you can be a hero, and I will support you with everything I have, and make up for me failing you. Izuku looked at his mom shocked. His shock turned to tears. He brought his hand to her shoulder and said, "Mom, you don't have to apologize to me. It's true that you hurt me back then when you didn't support me. But it doesn't matter now. I forgave you a long time ago. I knew that you just wanted to look after me. You are not a failure. You are the most important person in the world to me. You were what kept me going when everything stood against me. You, Eevee, and Pikachu, you were the ones that gave my life meaning. You made me into who I am today." He looked to his mother with a whimpering smile and said, "I forgave you, Mom, and I forgive you now, and I will continue to forgive you for the rest of my life. Without you, I wouldn't be here today, and I'll make it up to you by being the hero that you see that I can be. A hero that will make you proud." The two embrace, tears pouring. "I love you, Izuku. With all my heart and soul," Inko said. Izuku replied, "I love you too, Mom." Pikachu and Eevee jumped onto the couch and cuddled the two Midoriyas, with Mr. Mime coming up and hugging all them too. Toshinori stared at the heartwarming moment between this family. He too shed a tear and knew he made the right choice. "I know I made the right choice, and I know you would think so too, Nana. This boy has such a pure heart, the heart of a true hero. One that will outshine even me." As the Midoriyas and their Pokemon broke up their hug, Izuku realized All Might was still there. He blushed embarrassed and shouted panicky, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Yagi." Izuku corrected. "I'm so sorry that you got caught in the middle of our whole family situation." Toshinori smiled and said, "It's truly okay, young Midoriya. In fact, I'm honored and humbled to have witnessed such a moment. It has made me truly confident in what I have to offer." Inko confused asked, "Oh yes, what is this offer that you mentioned?" Toshinori said, "As I said, your son risked his life to save the boy, despite not being a pro, and did it without having a quirk as you mentioned. Not to mention that his bond with his Pokemon shows that he has a passionate, trusting heart. This kind of heroism and potential I feel would be wasted if not grown and trained to his fullest potential. Like you, I also believe that Izuku has the makings of a true hero. Mrs. Midoriya, I would formally like to offer my services to train young Midoriya to become the best hero he can be." Mrs. Midoriya was stunned. She said, "Are you sure?" Toshinori smiled and said, "Yeah, I do, 100% sure. In fact, I wish to help train him for the UA entrance exam." Mrs. Midoriya stuttered out, "This is all so sudden. Oh, my baby has inspired not only All Might, but also someone that works for him who wants to train my son. Oh, this is so much. I wonder what kind of money will develop pay for mumble star." Izuku and All Might stared at the mother with a sweat drop. "Well, the apple never falls far from the Trevenant," All Might thought. "Is that how I look like when I mumble?" Izuku thought as well. Pikachu and Eevee were holding themselves back from laughing tremendously, while Mr. Mime mimed out an invisible frying pan and started hitting himself with it, which made Toshinori almost crack up in laughter. Izuku snapped his mother out of her trance, to which she apologized for her mumbling. Toshinori said, "That's quite alright. But have no fear, Mrs. Midoriya, this training offer I have won't interfere with Izuku's school life or your work life. I plan to have this training both physically and mentally prepare your son for the exam, with benefits that will also improve upon his overall health, like a sleep and food schedule. I also wish to say that you do not have to worry about having to pay me back. This training will be free of charge, and I will personally provide any funds for any extra groceries or workout equipment that you might need." Inko replied, "You can't. This is too much." Toshinori said, "No, it isn't. To see your son become the hero he can be and to help him fulfill his dream on becoming a pro, I will gladly do this." Izuku said, "Mom, I already accepted this offer before when he met up with me after the incident. He told me that both he and All Might thought that I could be a hero, that I had what it took to be a great one. All my life, I dreamed for an opportunity like this, to have a shot into getting into UA, All Might school. I couldn't say no, but I wanted you to know about this and to ask for your blessing. As much as I want to become a hero and train right away, I knew I couldn't do it without your support. So please, Mom, please accept. Please let me train with Mr. Yagi." Inko looked at her son and smiled proudly, same with All Might. She then said, "Thank you, Izuku, for taking my feelings into consideration, and I'm proud of you, for finding your calling in life and working to make that a reality by your own strength. But, I have one condition before I agree." She looked to All Might and said, "Mr. Yagi, my condition is that you take care of my son. To protect him. Lead him down this road and help him become a hero, but please assure me that my baby boy is safe." Toshinori stood up and bowed. "I promise you, Mrs. Midoriya, I will do as you ask. I promise to lead Midoriya down to this path and keep him safe to the best of my abilities." Mrs. Midoriya smiled and said, "Then I have no reason to disagree. You may train Izuku." Izuku smiled brightly. Eevee and Pikachu cheered and jumped onto the two Midoriyas again. All Might smiled and looked to Izuku's eyes, who looked back to him. All Might smiled and had fire in his eyes that asked him, "Are you ready?" Izuku smiled back and gave his own challenging stare. "Yes." Izuku thought. "Bring it on." 2 days later, Izuku started to regret his internally agreement. After they got the go-ahead from his mother, All Might informed Izuku to meet him by Tagaba Municipal Beach Park at dawn's first light 2 days from then. Izuku did as told, and when light first peeked out in the horizon that day, Izuku dressed in a plain white tee and blue sport pants. Eevee woke ran with him, Pikachu following suit as the yellow rat tended to sleep outdoors. Izuku could barely hold his own excitement at the prospect of being trained by the #1 pro hero and symbol of peace. That was until he was right now. Izuku, wrapped in ropes, pulled uselessly against the large fridge, and staked up top of it was All Might in his large and muscular buff form. Eevee and Pikachu watched from the side. Well, mostly Eevee, while Pikachu decided to get rummaged through the mountains of trash and junk for some cool stuff. Izuku pulled with all his strength, gritting and grunting loudly. All Might called out, "Hey. How you doing down there? It's comfy up on this stationary fridge." Izuku tried pulling one more time, invigorated by All Might's taunt, before slipping and falling to the ground. Eevee flinched at his fall, while Pikachu climbed out of the piles of trash wearing a luchador mask, pretending to drive a pile of wrappers. All Might called out again, "People move these all the time, you know, and most don't even have super strength." Izuku called back, "Yeah, but did they have a 600-pound behemoth sitting on top of one? You weighed even more than a mega tyranitar." All Might comically flinched and sulkily said, "Now that's just insulting." He then perked up and said, "But for your information, I lost weight nowadays, so I'm down to 560 these days. In this form at least." Izuku quipped, "Still more heavy than 2 Munklaxes." All Might comically sulked again. "Geez, why did I have to choose such a rude successor?" The symbol of peace jokingly said. Izuku nervously chuckled, both internally freaking out, thinking All Might was serious, and yet convincing himself it was just a joke. Hopefully, Izuku thought. Izuku lifted himself off the ground and said, "Yeah, that's great. But question. Why do you have me hauling trash here again?" All Might let out a hearty chuckle and said, "Well, look just at your weak little body." He started taking pictures of Izuku with his phone. "Look at you. You aren't ready for my power." Izuku's self-confidence took another hit, and he started comically bowling. "But I thought you said that I was worthy Wayayug." Izuku wailed like crying Sobble. Eevee sighed at his partner's inability to take a joke. He then looked to see Pikachu posing like a wrestler, to which his response was a deadpan look. All Might climbed off the fridge, walking over to Midoriya and said, "Calm down, I'm taking about your weak body." Izuku calmed down and looked to the pro hero who continued, "Before we continue, there is something else you should know about how my quirk works. Young Midoriya, tell me, what do you know about ore?" Izuku looked confused at the question before he tried to remember. "Ore?" Izuku though loud. "Ore is said to be the life force and spiritual energy that flows throughout all people in Pokemon. Many Pokemon, mostly Pokemon like Riolu and Lucario, can harness this energy for moves and other amazing feats. Many research studies on aura suggest that aura is a main component in the strong bonds between people and Pokemon, and how phenomenons like Mega Evolution can occur." All Might smiled brighter at the smart head of his successor. "Right, nice information exposition, but there is something else about aura that most tend to overlook, even forget." Izuku looked at All Might confused, while this drew the attention of Eevee and Pikachu who walked over. All Might continued with, "You see, I was taught this by a former teacher of mine and my predecessor, the one who possessed one for all before me. They taught how and how long ago in distant past, back in times before Pokeballs and our knowledge of the world was so little, that there are humans who too possessed, noble warriors that fought to protect the peace and the lives of people and Pokemon alike. Those who know about them would describe them as the first heroes of old. They were referred to as Aura Guardians." "Aura Guardians?" Izuku repeated. "Oh yeah, I remembered hearing about that in an old book. I read that they could use moves similar to Aura Sphere, or can even sense and heal the life force of people in Pokemon. Those who believe the stories claim that it was the first emergence of quirks, but most dismiss it as myths." All Might nodded and said yes, and they are not wrong. Quirks are very different than what the legends describe. Quirks manifest and are linked to our bodies by our genetic code, which is why some children can develop quirks that are the same or similar to the quirks of their parents. They're also each different and unique, some quirks even completely different than their parents, and are referred to as mutation quirks. But the powers that these Aura Guardians used are different. Many a times the legends revolving them change, depending on the person or story, and many times they have similar sets of limited abilities, with no distinct relation between them. Plus, as Aura has been studied to reside in every person in Pokemon, as you said, and described as a sort of spiritual, life force, it would be incorrect to say that these Aura Guardians had quirks. More or less, this power falls similar to the description of magic, a form similar to the magical powers of Pokemon. Izuku stared in awe of the knowledge that the #1 hero possessed. While Izuku looked up to All Might in his heart-moving speeches, Izuku did have enough sense to know that many would describe All Might as not known for his book smarts. All Might continued with as time went on, and as quirks nowadays are the norm, the legends of these Aura Guardians are almost all but extinct. But these stories are more real than anybody could have guessed. And my quirk, One for All, is likewise powered by Aura. Izuku stood there in pure shock. He managed to stumble out, "But All Might, you just said that Aura and the powers of Aura Guardians aren't quirks, right?" All Might smirked wider, holding up a finger in a gotcha manner. He then said, "Ah, yes, I did say that the powers of the Aura Guardians mentioned were not quirks, but I never said that there couldn't be a quirk that can harness the power of Aura, similar to that of the Aura Guardians. You see, as I told you 2 days ago, One for All harnesses the physical abilities and life energy of its past users, and Aura is the life force and spiritual energy that resides in every human in Pokemon. So that means that One for All stores both the physical abilities and aura of its past users, and allows for you to use their power, along with your own, to be so strong and powerful," Izuku said, finishing All Might's sentence. All Might nodded and said correct. One for All is a literal whirlwind of the combined physical abilities and aura of all who have ever wielded it, including my own now. As such, if an unprepared body receives it, it could disastrous consequences. For instance, your arms and legs could shoot off. Izuku cried in horror at the mental image of his limbs blasting off of his body. Eevee and Pikachu too shivered at the thought, their hairs standing on ends. Izuku's mind then clicked on the purpose of his training. "Oh, I see. All this trash lifting is a form of exercise to strengthen my body to prepare for your quirk, and you are my coach. I get how it fits with the physical abilities of the quirk, but what about the aura part? How is a stronger body supposed to prepare for the combined aura of One for All? Sound like aura might be more powerful than just regular physical quirks, especially since some Pokemon can use it." All Might answered, "You are right in how this training will make you better suited for the quirk, but as for the aura aspect, it's actually quite easy when you don't think too hard on it. Aura basically acts like a spiritual battery for our souls. The stronger a person is, the more aura they have inside them, the more powerful a Pokemon becomes, the more aura they have that powers them, but very few can directly channel it. Take for instance, Riolu and Lucario. The Lucario uses aura with little to no effort, because they are stronger and more connected to it, whilst a regular Riolu can't. Plus, just like you stated about aura being theorized a key component in Mega Evolution, it requires both the infinity energy inside the stones, and the strong bond between human and Pokemon, a strong spiritual-like bond that could be straightened more with access to aura, just like Mega Lucario." Izuku descended once again into spiraling vortex of mumbling and thinking, furiously writing down the information about aura in his hero notebook. All Might's sweat dropped, feeling foolish to not realize how the revelation would impact young Midoriya. Pikachu snapped him out by smacking the back of Izuku's head with its tail. Izuku shook off the hit and quickly apologized. All Might coughed and said, "To run things down, this training will enhance and strengthen your body to be able to receive and wield One for All, but there is another reason. You see, I've read recently how this beach was quite a beauty to behold, but it has gone through quite the change, hasn't it?" Izuku stared at the mountains of trash all around them and said, "Yeah, but since the waves wash ashore trash from the sea and it piles up, people take advantage of it, and illegally throw away their trash here." Izuku noticed a family of Trubushes walking around, fending off a group of Hawaiian Rattata, regional variants of Rattata that must have migrated here somehow. All Might nodded and said, "Yes, it's the same that such natural beauty should be polluted, so I'm going to have you fix it." Izuku whirled to face All Might in surprise. All Might gave a hearty laugh and said, "A is right, young Midoriya. Things were different before quirks, so was the definition of what was a hero. These days heroes all about stopping villains and being flashy. Things like civil services were what mattered, people who helped the community and the lives of people in Pokemon. And as such, this training will also instill into you the ideals and actions that a hero should value." All Might reached a hand out to the fridge he was laying on and crushed it into a flat pulp in a second. Wind pressure from his active strength blasted off the trash behind him to reveal the shining light of the dawning sun over the coast. "You will clean this entire section of the beach," All Might proclaimed. "That is your first test and step to becoming a hero," Izuku said, "but look at all this. There's so much. That's impossible." All Might looked to Izuku and asked young Midoriya, "You want to go to UA, right? Tell me, why UA out of all the other hero schools?" Izuku was sucked monetarily before contemplating an answer. He responded, "It's because you went there, All Might. It's where legends like you, Endeavor, and Best Genius were trained. It's seen as the best of the best, the #1 hero school in all of Japan, maybe even the whole world. And if I want to become the hero I want to be, a great shining hero who saves people with a smile on his face, then I have to reach for the top and become as strong as I can be. I know it's a long shot, but I'll shoot for the moon, and even if I fail, I'll find a way to continue on and land among the stars." All Might was taken back at the boy's passion before smiling brighter and said, "That's the spirit, fanboy. But I should warn you that this path will not be easy. In this society, heroing is dangerous, especially without a quirk. It's not fair, but that's reality for you. UA is indeed the best of the best, and you have only 10 months to prepare for the hardest hero course of them all." Luckily, All Might then pulled out a stack of paper almost out of nowhere. "I've got you covered with my Aim to Win American Dream plan. This workout plan canvasses the amount of work you need to do every day, extra workout sessions, and a diet to follow along. Follow this to the letter and I'll have you become for the exam and my quirk in no time. I've even managed to come up with a workout plan and diet for your Pokemon too, so your bonds and strength will grow together. Izuku took the papers and as he read through them, he cringed and began sweating comically at the effort All Might put into it. Even my sleep is scheduled. Izuku mumbled out in disbelief. All Might brought a hand to Izuku's shoulder, prompting the green-haired boy to look up at the symbol of peace. He asked, "So, do you have what it takes?" Izuku stared at him in awe. He felt a pull from the bottom of his pant legs to find Eevee and Pikachu looking at him with confidence. "Eevee? Hi Pikachu." The two Pokemon cried out in a cheer, Pikachu still wearing his found lechugar suit. Izuku smiled at the two with tearful eyes. He looked back to his new mentor, smiled confidently, and said yes. "Lead me to be the best, like no one ever was." As the months passed, Izuku's training could only be described by him as a living hell. Every day, Izuku would follow All Might's instructions by the letter, and then some. Izuku gave the diet listing to his mother, who with the help of All Might as promised, was no trouble at all. At home, Izuku would train diligently, lifting weights and doing basic cardio exercises, like push-ups and pull-ups. Eevee and Pikachu mimicked Izuku, training themselves by pushing heavy objects and practicing moves on each other, while trying not to destroy the Midoriya household. Izuku remembers fondly how Pikachu tried lifting a weight like a dumbbell, only to end up on his side, and when Eevee tried slamming a large metal block with his head, only to gain a big bump on his head. Izuku would go to school, as normal as always. He would study hard, acing all his tests and assignments. He would even try to formulate a better workout regimen during and after class, the former ending after getting reprimanded by his teacher for mumbling in class. Izuku even took his workout sessions even further by using a hand grip machine under his desk and hovering above his seat. Though Izuku did notice a certain change happen in his school life. His classmates teased him less, sometimes barely paying attention to him. He also noticed Bakugo avoiding Izuku, leaving him alone, rather than do his usual routine of beating the crap out of him, or using his body for court target practice. Izuku didn't know why the explosive teen left him alone, pondering if it was his way of saying thanks for saving him from the sludge villain, or maybe just not wanted to be reminded of useless, shitty Deku saving his life. As much as Izuku hoped that it meant his ex-childhood friend changing for the better, Izuku believed the latter more. Either way, Katsuki was helping Izuku more than he realized. Now Deku can keep the old healing bruises and burns hidden from his mother and All Might, and have his body get stronger now that he can keep his food in his stomach, without throwing it up from a punch to the gut. Izuku knew that he could very get even with Katsuki, of all the bullying, physical and mental torment, a suicide baiting, if he just told All Might, who would probably reveal it to UA and the authorities, probably blacklisting him from any hero course in the country. He would finally make the jerk pay for all the pain he caused him, the pain he and his Kolava inflicted on Eevee when they were younger. But he didn't. He couldn't. He wouldn't become like Bakugo. He wouldn't destroy the fellow teen's future over grudge. But more or less, Izuku wanted to prove Katsuki wrong, that he could become a hero. He wanted to best his unofficial symbol of victory, and become a better hero than even him. But he couldn't help the small, dark whisper of thought of seeing Bakugo fail and struggle, as the reality that being a hero is more than defeating villains crashes onto him like a truck filled with karma and irony. Izuku would finish up his school and homework as best as he could, so he could go clean the beach and train with All Might. As he cleaned the beach and lifted and pushed all kinds of machinery and trash, Izuku used and trained different types of muscle groups with each kind of object, with rarely at times All Might helping out, like when he almost broke his neck on a dumbbell. His Pokemon also trained along with him, assisting him with some of the junk, and even fighting off Pokemon that took offense of Midoriya cleaning out the beach. All Might also introduced some of his own Pokemon that he brought along to help train Eevee and Pikachu. As much as All Might was praised for his own power and strength, his Pokemon too received credit as some of the most powerful Pokemon around. Pokemon with strength on the level of a Pokemon champion, and beyond. He also had a vast array of Pokemon at his disposal, what with pro heroes being able to possess more than 6 Pokemon at a time, than the usual legal standards that were enacted after the Age of Heroes. They could use as much as 12 Pokemon on them at maximum, but since the process of having those Pokemon registered as active partners during hero work was so long and excruciating, most pro heroes would still use 1 or 2 Pokemon out on the field, withholding 4 to 5 more for emergency situations. For All Might, he was able to have about 8 different Pokemon on him, each unofficial alpha among their own species. His Pokemon included from his Braviary, Machamp, Sirfetch'd, Hawlucha, Dragonite, Jolteon, Lucario, and, his most popular Pokemon, Cinderace. Izuku almost went into a coma from pure excitement at seeing his Pokemon, with his Eevee following suit, as the evolution Pokemon looked to them like they were gods. All Might even revealed that One for All also comes with a neat bonus ability that allows him to be mentally in tune with his Pokemon, allowing him to make mental commands, and know what his Pokemon are saying in his mind, and allows for their own auras to be linked to him and grow stronger over time. Izuku gushed at the thought of speaking to Eevee and Pikachu clearly. Eevee gushed over Cinderace and Jolteon, much to the Jolteon's amusement and Cinderace's smugness. Pikachu too was impressed at the power and imposing pressure the Pokemon extruded, mostly on Jolteon, a fellow electric type, and Lucario, for some reason. All Might's Pokemon held the symbol of peace in whipping Izuku and his Pokemon into shape. Cinderace, Braviary, Dragonite focused the two Pokemon on speed, Pikachu especially excelling in competing against their impressive speeds. Machamp, Halecha, and Searfetch focused the two on power, helping them increase their attack stats, and Lucario and Dragonite assisting in special attack. Their defense and special defense training was handled by Dragonite, Braviary, and Lucario, whilst they practiced their accuracy with Braviary too, along with Halecha and Jolteon, the three Pokemon helping them improve their accuracy by being constant, hard-to-hit targets. But the most memorable moment throughout these 10 hellish months of training was his birthday. Then, Izuku reached the age of 15, effectively making him the legal age to catch more Pokemon, and hold more than the standard one for adolescents. There Izuku had a normal school day as always, nobody paying any mind to him, except a glowering Bakugo who one day looked about to talk with him before scoffing and turning away. One of the best gifts Koch-chan ever gave me. A day without him. Izuku thought dryly. He then came to the beach as usual, where he was congratulated by All Might and his Pokemon, who gave him a Pokeball with a lightning bolt stamped onto the front red part of it. Izuku remembered the day vividly. Flashback. Izuku stood before Pikachu, the sun shining over them, Eevee, All Might, and his Pokemon standing by the side watching. Izuku knelt down before the electric mouse Pokemon and said, "Well, the day has come, huh? It's kinda crazy how all this time, even thought you were always wild and free. I always say you as mine, as my partner, a best friend along with Eevee. I don't care whatever person would say that you can only have one best friend, from the moment we met, the moment you saved us, all the times you played and spent time with me and Eevee, where you stood by me during the most important moments in my life, you were my best friend too. One of the best friends any boy could ask." Pikachu always was one to act cool, headstrong, confident, and a jokester of a Pokemon, but today even he couldn't help but let out some waterworks, his ears tilting downwards at the words of his once unofficial trainer. "Pikapai," Pikachu said sadly, nodding his head in acknowledgement and tears. Izuku sniffled and wiped his eyes. He continued with, "So as a friend, I want to ask you, Pikachu, if you are willing to become my official Pokemon, if you are willing to give up being wild and free to be by my side for all the days and moments to come, even when the times grow dark and the lights start to fade. Will you, Pikachu, like to walk beside me, as hero and Pokemon? As best friends, forever?" Pikachu sniffled and wiped his own eyes before sticking his ears and crying out aloud and passionate, "Hi Pikachu. Pikachu." Izuku smiled brightly, knowing the answer and said, "Well then, welcome aboard, partner." Izuku lifted the Pokeball before Pikachu, holding out for him to have the final say. Pikachu smiled a bright toothy smile, jumped, and slapped his hands onto the middle circle of the ball. In a flash of white, Pikachu was sucked into the ball, it closing shut and wiggled in his palm. The click, the shaking stopped and the final sound said it all. Izuku caught Pikachu. Izuku smiled and tossed the ball into the air, it opening up and releasing another blast of white light. Pikachu materialized from the light, shaking its head in discomfort at its short time into the ball. It looked around before looking to his new owner, who smiled brightly with tears leaking out. The electric mouse jumped towards his new owner's arms and hugged him tight, Eevee running up to them and joining in. All Might and his Pokemon smiled and clapped at the sight, All Might wiping a stray tear, reminiscing on how he first caught Scorbunny. As Izuku hugged the two, he opened his eyes to see Pikachu's tail, wagging in front of his face, almost deliberately. There he was reminded of the hidden mark that Pikachu always kept hidden and out of his view. As he looked closely, the mark looked to be as black as the tip of his tail, its shape in the form of an X-cross-like wheel, with 18 dots surrounding it in a circle. Flashback over. Afterwards, All Might let Izuku off early to spend his birthday with his mother, who congratulated and doted on Izuku motherly. She even made him a cake, a vegetable cake. Izuku insisted to stick to the diet, so it was an alternative, despite feeling like he and his mom created an unholy creation, if the looks of disgust from Eevee, Pikachu, and Mr. Mime, whom I'm puking in an imaginary toilet, were anything to go by. The months went by as normal, with nothing changing much else, especially with Pikachu. While he now sleeps with Izuku and Eevee in his room, Pikachu refused to ever go back into his Pokeball, looking terrified whenever it came into view, and even shocking Izuku with a more powerful thunderbolt that left him looking comically smoky. So it was decided that Pikachu would stay free from his Pokeball, and only enter it under extreme emergencies, a promise held under the threat of an iron tail, thunderbolt beatdown. Izuku wondered how some of these magical creatures can be so cute and adorable one moment, yet so vicious and terrifying in the next. As months went by, Izuku became more focused and exceeded the amount of trash he lifted and exercises he did. Soon the consequences of these actions will come to fruition. Flashback. Izuku, while carrying a large metal box, and his Pokemon ran down a path covered in full and cherry blossom petals, All Might, in his true state, speeding along on a Segway, with Cinderace running in front of them. Soon enough though, Izuku collapsed to the ground in exhaustion, his Pokemon rushing towards him in worry. All Might stopped when he heard the commotion to find his successor crawling and twitching feebly on the ground. Hey, look alive kid, All Might said. You've only got 3 months till the exam. Now's not the time to start collapsing out of nowhere and flush all our progress down the drain. As Izuku crawled and tried to get up, Toshinori realized the problem. The aim to pass American Dream Plan was created with your body in mind, fine-tuned, so that it was as swift as possible, yet manageable. Which means, you haven't been sticking to it, have you? Izuku flinched. You're overworked, you're overdoing things to the point of exhaustion. That's going to have the opposite effect of what we want. Izuku crawled forward and grunted out, I have to work harder, or I won't stand a chance against the other applicants. I don't just want into UA, remember? I want to excel. Toshinori was taken back. Izuku pushed his body up and looked at All Might with fiery determination. I want to become the greatest hero in the world. So I'll keep on training, as hard as I can, as much as I can, till I'll have what it takes. Toshinori was taken aback to the boy's overwhelming drive and conviction. Got to hand it to the kid, he's given a lot of thought about the future. Sorta like me, I suppose. He buffed up and picked a weakened Izuku off the ground and proclaimed, that's what I like about you, young Midoriya. So tenacious. So passionate. Fear not, I understand your concerns, but now's not the time to rush progress or take it easy. Don't you worry, I can help you get back on track. Leave it to this old man to adjust your plan. Behind him, Cinderace facepalmed at his partner's rhyme, making Eevee and Pikachu chuckle as well. Izuku tiredly said, you're not that old, All Might. Ha 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 ha. All Might let out an amused laugh at his successor defending him from his own criticism. Flashback over, and so afterwards, All Might was true to his word, and Izuku found himself back on track to gain one for all, and be ready for the UA exam. Soon another month passed, and Dagaba Beach was looking more cleaner than ever, much to the surprise and delight of the community. Now, Izuku was jogging through Dagaba Beach, as the sunset shined over the coast. He jogged by a happy couple wearing expensive beach clothes, overhearing on accident about them talking about a girl, their daughter perhaps, named Momo. Izuku shook his head clear of his thoughts, not wanting to eavesdrop on a couple's talk like a creep, and kept jogging. After a while, Izuku stopped for a break, catching his breath and drinking from his sports drink. Before he could continue running, he heard the laughter of a girl's voice. Izuku stopped and followed the voice, who just so happened to be just ahead of him. There he found a girl playing with her Piplup by the coast, splashing water at a Pokemon. Izuku froze, his eyes widening, at the very definition of beauty in front of him. She looked around his age, standing at 5'5", around his height, and she wore a pair of khaki short shorts that showcased her long creamy legs to her perfect sandaled feet and her ample ass, which left Izuku blushing more. She wore an ocean blue crop top that showed a bit of skin around her waist and her impressive bust, Izuku blushing wildly and shied away from, and also wore an open white beach dress shirt. She wore a straw hat over her long, wavy, strawberry blonde hair, blue wave pattern highlights in her hair, only adding to her beauty. Her face, however, left Izuku heart-pounding like a wild rillaboom. Her perfect heart-shaped face, shapely cheeks, a cute nose, smiling, bright white teeth, and her eyes, as blue and shining as the gleaming sea. Izuku was so transfixed by her beauty that he didn't notice her in front of him until she said hey. Izuku snapped out of his trance, blushing like a tomato at the girl before him. She asked, are you okay? You've been staring off into space for a while, and your face is as red as a tomato. Izuku jumped back slightly at a close proximity, and stuttered out oh, yes I'm fine. I just spaced out and got a little dizzy. I was jogging by and I think I just got a small heat stroke. Izuku was somewhat glad that Eevee and Pikachu were resting by the remaining junk with All Might. If they saw him right now they would tease him to no end, like the time he bumped into that invisible girl by accident, and blushed in embarrassment as she apologized cutely. The girl gained a tiny look of concern and said, oh my. Well we can't have that. Here. I can help cool you off. The girl then directed her hand to the coast, closing her eyes and let out a deep breath. Suddenly, a stream of water flew and flowed into the air and onto her outstretched hand, flowing between her fingers and hands. Izuku stared in awe of her quirk and stared as she directed it above his head, and sprinkled on his head, cooling him off. Izuku smiled brightly with awe on his face and said thanks, I feel much better. Wow. That was amazing. Your quirk is awesome. The girl blushed, twiddling her fingers and looked away shyly. Thanks. It was no problem, really. Realization sprung onto her face and said, uh-oh. A second later, the water above splashed onto Izuku's head, no longer under her control. Serena let out a gasp of horror, followed by a string of apologies. Oh, I'm so sorry. I lost my concentration and let the water go. I'm so sorry. Izuku stuttered out, oh no, it's okay, really. I understand. It's alright. Plus, it helped even more in cooling me off, so thank you. A few seconds passed before they calmed down. But seriously, that quirk you have is something else. Can you please tell me what it is? Izuku shouted in excitement, his inner fanboy rising to the surface. Serena blushed again and said sure. My quirk is called Hydro. It allows me to manipulate water molecules, so that I have complete control over anything liquid or made of water, but I lose control if I'm not concentrated enough. It's not something overall special, and kind of useless outside of any source of water. She gained a downtrodden look. Izuku, not noticing her sunken expression, instead shouted in awe, "Are you kidding? That kind of quirk is amazing." The girl let out a gasp of shock and completely stunned look on her blushing face. That kind of quirk sounds extremely powerful and versatile. You could manipulate water to form all kinds of weapons, like shield against physically attacking villains or whips to strike and capture individuals. You could probably manipulate the water inside a person's lung in an advanced, efficient form of CPR. You could become a seriously powerful force in the water, but you could also use the water along a city's sewer pipes. I wonder if you can also breathe underwater, or if you can form a bubble of air around yourself to breathe down under for a long time. Mumble. Star Izuku suddenly pulled out a pocket-sized notebook from seemingly out of nowhere, along with a pen, and started writing down his thoughts and analysis over her quirk. The girl, however, didn't mind the mumbling state of his, staring at him in awe and wonder. He likes my quirk, the girl thought. No one has ever told that to me before, except my parents, but I thought they were just trying to make me feel better. The girl could hear the voices and jeers that she has heard all her life start playing in her head. Seriously, all you could do is control water. That's such a lame power. Haha. What are you going to do? Splash the villains to death? What a loser. It's such a useless quirk when there's no water. I bet you will get nowhere as a hero. You might end up failing and dying. But soon, the voices started to fade away. The jeers and cruel laughs replaced by the kind and encouraging thoughts of the boy in front of her. Her blush became harder as he smiled, a cute dazzling smile that seemed to make the darkness in her heart fade away. Before Izuku could mumble out any more analysis over her quirk, she rushed over and hugged him, tightly. Izuku was snapped out of his mumbling, eyes widened, face heating up, and jaw dropping at the act. The girl pulled away quickly, looking away shyly as she blushed hard. "Thank you for saying those kind words. My name is Serena Mariella. It's nice to meet you." Izuku blushed red hot before shaking his head and smiled. "Nice to meet you, Serena. I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you too." Serena liked his smile. It made him look charming and cute. The two stared at each other, almost like they were frozen, before Izuku was sprayed by a blast of water. Serena gasped in shock and turned to find Piplup beside her, blasting Izuku with the water gun, the Pokemon laughing as she did it. Serena let out another string of apologies and scolded Piplup for her actions, the tiny penguin Pokemon, turning away from her in a huff. Serena sighed defeated and said, "I'm sorry about Piplup. She's usually super sweet, but gets angry and feisty around anyone who gets close to me." Izuku stared in wonder at the scene before him, of a Pokemon disobeying her partner, a scenario that Izuku knew was possible, but one he never ever saw before. Pikachu may be feisty as well, and lash out at him at times, but Izuku knew those were just for laughs and pranks. Even Bakugo's Kulava, arrogant and proud as his owner, would still listen to him without fail. So the scene before him was perplexing to Izuku a bit. Izuku responded, "It's okay, really. I can understand. My Pikachu can be a handful as well, but I know he means well. He can be feisty and shock me at times, but I know it's all just jokes and giggles. I know in the end, he still cares for me, and supports me on my pursuit to becoming a hero." Serena turned to Izuku fast and said, "Wait, you going to become a hero?" "So am I." Izuku stared at her more in awe and said, "Really?" Serena smiled nervously and started twirling a piece of hair in circles, saying, "Yeah, I'm actually going to be taking an entrance exam at a hero school, but I probably won't get in. Not when my quirk isn't useful without nearby sources of water." Izuku responded with, "That's not true. Your quirk is so awesome and plenty useful, even without actual water nearby. If you can control all types of water by their molecules, have you ever tried manipulating ice, the water inside of plants? Or maybe you can use a support item that can store some water for you to use." Serena was shocked again before she thought things over. "No," she said. "No, I haven't tried, but it could work. Thank you for the advice. Are you going to apply to a hero course too?" Izuku smiled brightly, clenched fist over his heart, and said, "Yep, I'm going to be applying for the hero course at UA High." Seer was shocked once again. "UA?" she asked. Before she could respond anymore, they both heard a woman's voice call out Serena. "It's time to go." They both turned behind her to see a young woman, a practical carbon copy of Serena, but with chocolate brown hair and whiter hips, calling out and waving at her. "Is it your mother?" Izuku asked. "Yeah, she is," Serena replied. She bowed her head and said, "I'm sorry, but I've got to go. I hope we get to see each other again." This was nice, talking to someone, like friend. Izuku blushed hard, but smiled nonetheless. "Of course, I can't wait to see you again, too. As a hero and as a friend." Suddenly, Serena snatched up Izuku's notebook and pen. Izuku was shocked and confused, but before he could say anything, she wrote something down and gave it back to him, with the number written down. "My number?" Serena said, blushing nervously. "In case you ever need to talk or hang out, and to keep in touch, if that's alright." Izuku blushed till he was the color of a cherry and muttered out, "Yeah, sure. Anytime." Serena smiled and walked towards her mother, waving back at Izuku. "See you later, Izuku. Hope to see you again." Izuku stuttered out, "Yeah, you too." He started walking the other direction. His mind let out of torrent of flustered thoughts, but the most prominent being, "Oh my god. I actually talked to a girl and I got her number." All the while Izuku didn't realize until later that he was walking in the wrong direction. Serena, as she walked to her mother, Pipple following behind her, she dug out an envelope tucked into back pocket. As she dug it out, she smiled and thought, "Yeah, I hope to see you again soon, Izuku." The envelope has a seal of UA. Her recommendation letter. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.